Here at Central. Appreciate the crowd here in attendance. Just in years past, this room was fairly full on our senior night program. So obviously, circumstances are a little bit different right now. There is the availability to watch this program online as well. So anyone who's tuning in virtually, welcome and thank you for attending. Good news is we won't really have any trouble social distancing this evening. So spread out. The plan for tonight is about 40 minutes of me presenting on post-secondary planning, opportunities for students, kind of the ins and outs of the application process. Then we're lucky to have Jack here from our statewide Illinois Student Assistance Commission. He's gonna hop up here after me and do a condensed version of financial aid. So the free application for federal student aid launches on October 1st, so it's coming up. And then next Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock, Alexis, who's our individual rep from ISAC, is going to do another live stream of more like the long version financial aid and getting you ready for October 1st. So we'll be sending that link out. A little bit of background just about me. This is my 6th year at Grayslake Central, 12th year in counseling overall. But I, similar to many students that we talk with, had a change of careers. We talk about finding the right fit for you. So my background was in radio broadcasting, did it professionally for 4 years, had a great experience, started kind of working with our interns at the time at the radio station, and that launched my interest in counseling. So my first job in the school system was actually at a student-run radio station in Downers Grove, and then started just volunteering with their counseling office. So as you students are sitting here, just be mindful of the career path that you're on today might be different by graduation, and it could change in college or even thereafter. And as long as you're continuing to use those soft skills, being on time, hardworking, collaborative, critical thinking, you can be very successful in whatever path you take. So with that being said, just to kind of get us started, anyone in the room fans of the movie Hotel Transylvania? Ever heard of it? Yeah, see some hands. So I'm lucky in my role to do a lot of college visits. In the summertime, we have a great organization through the state that takes us on week-long trips to various colleges. We've flown to Atlanta and spent 5 days in the South. We've driven out to Pennsylvania, Ohio, and we really see some cool things. So I just wanted to share you a few things. This is the Rafsker Lounge at Transylvania University in Louisville, Kentucky. Probably many people didn't know that there's a university called Transylvania. It's a great small private liberal arts college. And this shows you there's a lot out there. We hear the kind of brand names that everyone talks about in the Midwest, but there's so many vast opportunities for students. This here is West Virginia University's campus. You can kind of see the mountains in the background. But what's cool is because it's such a hilly campus, they have these little cars that take students around town. And they have fun with them as well. I think there's a challenge for like what sorority or fraternity can fit the most number of people into one car at a time, and the number is over several hundred. They're like laying on top of each other and sideways and to the ceiling. So as you travel and you visit campuses, these are some of the things that you'll pick up along the way that kind of make it feel like home. It's not just about a school that you're attending, it's what's the community like? What are the traditions that are specific to these colleges? This is really kind of an interesting statue. This is at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. So everyone in this picture is a statue, the people on the ground as well. And this sits in the middle of their quad, and it's kind of up towards the sky. And I don't know the exact meaning of it, but it's sort of unique and just was a picture that was very interesting to me. Next one, my favorite, over at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. They have pizza ATMs. So you pop some money in, you get 3 minutes, and there comes out your fresh pizza. Didn't certainly have this when I was a senior at ISU, otherwise I think I would have probably eaten it quite often. But these are the types of things that as you take visits, I think you'll start to get a sense of like, what is this campus gonna be like? How am I living here 5 days a week? Do I have access to food that I like? I think a lot of times we place value in name of the college, but not necessarily the experience that you're gonna have there. So just be mindful that the campus visits, and I know last year they were mostly closed, have reopened, and that might be what helps sell you on a college experience. Okay, to move right along, this is our list of our counseling staff. So Mr. K is at the front of the alphabet. He has A through COY, Ms. Rossi, CRA through HERN. Ms. Mitchell serves as our department chair and has the caseload HERR through CNA. Again, I'm Mr. Goldman. I have KOE through OHM. Ms. Casillas follows me at OLA and SHA, and then Ms. Prasnowski, who's with us in the back tonight, has the end of the alphabet SHE through Z. We're fortunate to have a couple of extra people helping us out. Ms. Larson is our counseling intern this year. She also lives in the community. Ms. Marquardt's our college and career assistant, so I know she sends out a lot of communication home to families about upcoming events, college visits. And then Ms. Sunday is great. She helps us out as our counseling assistant. What does this number mean to anyone in the room? Any guesses? You got it. 246 days until graduation. That starts to hit home. You know, as seniors in the room, it's getting real. It's still a ways away. That's a lot of time. But when we presented to students last week, the first question I asked was, how many people in the room are feeling like this? Super excited, very happy that graduation is coming, ready to go, big smile on their face, and about half the students raised their hands. The other half kind of looked like this. They were a little bit nervous, yet the same hands went up for both, and that's normal. There's some level of excitement, I think, for all students. There's some level of nerves. For the most part, they've come to the school in their community just because that's where they live. Now you have so many vast options of what to do when you leave high school that can bring excitement, but certainly it can bring nerves, and we understand that. So that being said, let's take a deep breath and kind of pause. Life has changed over the last 18 months. We're still in a pandemic, hopefully on the back end of it, but we understand that future goals may have been impacted by economic factors, fears about health, so we just have to kind of slow down and ask questions, take our time, figuring out what's the right next step for you. Many schools, due to the pandemic, have gone test optional for the class of 2021 and now the class of 2022, meaning you don't have to send a test score as part of the application process. You're still welcome to, and you can, but there's no downside to not sending a score if it's not something you're happy with. The website fairtest.org is a running list of the colleges that are test optional. A couple years back, prior to COVID, that list was growing. It started off as a few like liberal arts colleges, grew to more schools, and then COVID hit and students physically couldn't take a test. So all colleges went test optional in 2021. During their application cycle, they realized, well, this didn't really have any bearing or impact on who we admitted and who we didn't. So we're gonna keep it going for the class of 22 and 23, and hopefully, further into the future. I think the statistics show that a test score doesn't indicate likelihood for success on a college campus. Rigor of courses, GPA in high school, involvement definitely have more impact. So this is good for students, but also if you feel like you want to send a score, you can, and just know you don't have to send a score to every college, but you may send it to some and not to others, depending on where you fit within their middle 50% range. What we want you really to think about is choosing your own path. You may be influenced by family, friends, talking to other people, but this is for you. So the starting point is, what are your options? And really it starts with CLC is the closest to us. It's 5 minutes away, it's an amazing community college, so you may consider starting at CLC for that first year or two, earning an associate's degree, and then transferring into the four-year school or going right into the workforce out of CLC. Harper Community College is down in Palatine, Oakton is in like the Des Plaines area, and then I listed Kirkwood College as well. Kirkwood is a little bit different. It's in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, but they have residential living. So it is a community college setting, 2-year program, but it's got residential apartments. So students live in quads. I've been to their campus before. It compares favorably with any 4-year college I've been to. Every student has a full kitchen, a living room, washer and dryer in this 4-person unit. They also have a very, very fancy medical residential like hospital setting on their campus. They own a hotel on their campus, so students that are studying culinary arts or that world get to run weddings, get to serve at their fine dining center. So it's just another option to consider because it's affordable being a community college and out of state. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. We do have, of course, many 4-year universities that we'll be talking about. Apprenticeship programs are very popular. The Construction Industry Service Corporation, we listed the website there through Cisco. Lake County JATC is our union-trained electricians. So their office is right off of 45, just kind of south of 120. And it's an amazing program, competitive for admission, but the students that are considering like graduating early in December could apply for this cycle, or you could wait a year. But the students that are in that program start off as a kind of an apprentice, making about $17 an hour. They gain the skills, and then they graduate from the program and are employed with a pretty solid earning wage right out of the gate. They don't have to continue on to a formal college program. It's just they're getting you trained, and there's a lot of employment opportunities through that. Same with the plumber's apprenticeship program. Of course, we have the military option for students, which includes the National Guard, and then many of our students will consider going right to the workforce. So counseling can support students with mock interviews, resume writing, and anything related to finding a job out of high school. We look at post-secondary education and run to the why. Do the numbers still support the value in education? And that's a national debate. Based on this information, it still shows that the median income of a doctoral degree is about $2,000 with an unemployment rate of 2.5%. As you go down the line, it gets a little bit lower for median average salary if you're at an associate's degree, high school diploma, and the unemployment rate climbs. So have that in mind. I think these numbers are skewed because it's probably prior to COVID. So right now with everything going on with employment in the US, it's hard to know what that would fall. But realistically, we can say the more education you receive, unemployment goes down, and wages go up, so it's something to consider. These are some of the colleges that we've seen are very popular for our students. In 2021, CLC was our biggest destination for our students, so more of our graduates went to CLC than any other college, but similarly, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, Marquette, Loyola, Purdue, ISU, Iowa, and then on the right-hand side, highest earning trade school jobs, so everything from radiation therapist, dental hygienist, plumber, HVAC technician, really good jobs that are trade school programs into a well-earning career from there. A couple of myths to think about as you're evaluating your options, that you have to pick a major before you apply. 50% or more of students apply to college undecided. They spend their first 2 years evaluating options and then deciding which program to continue on. Many students also pick a major as a freshman and then change it by the end of their sophomore year. So there is a time to make that decision. You don't have to have a major in mind before you apply. Colleges only accept the best students. I'll never make it. That's realistically a myth as well. Most colleges admit over 50% of applicants in a wide-ranging mix of students. There are several colleges in Illinois that with a 2.5 GPA or above, you have automatic admission into that university. And as you get to like a 3.0, maybe some scholarships are attached to that. So just know that you don't have to be a straight A student to attend college. You don't, if you have a D on your report card or an F, that doesn't mean you can't go to college. It just means like there's a variety of schools that we want to help you find the right fit. There's only one college that will make me happy. We've all been there before. We walk on a campus and we think, okay, this is the one for me. This is my dream school. I kind of fell in love with it. It might be a great fit, but there's probably others that would make you equally as happy. So just be mindful of, there might be one, but there's probably 3 or 4 that are similar to that that would probably work for you. In-state colleges are always the cheapest option. That is a myth. You know, I think 20 plus years ago, that was more commonly true than it is now. Many states out of Illinois have really done a great job recruiting our students. We actually struggle to retain high school seniors. Going back a couple years, Illinois was second worst in the country in losing graduates to out-of-state colleges, only behind New Jersey. So a lot of schools are realizing Lake County, Cook County, McHenry County have great students. They're going to throw money at you for scholarships to make it a more affordable option. And as you know, the budget in Illinois sometimes is a challenge, so a lot of our state schools can't offer those merit-based scholarships that other schools or private schools can. So just be mindful of, it could be in-state, but that doesn't mean it's going to be cheaper. All your peers have a plan. We meet with every senior on our caseload, so Ms. Przanowski and I probably in the last week and a half have had 20 to 25 conversations with seniors. We hear it from them individually, and everyone is still figuring things out. Yeah, maybe some people are a couple steps further along, but in the reality is nobody has a final plan yet, so it's okay to kind of move slowly. We do want to make sure we hit deadlines if they're approaching, but at the same time, not everyone has a plan. You're not the only one feeling potentially lost. Couple of just articles we want to highlight. The first one is 3 years old now. It's back from 2018, but I think it's still very true. High-paying trade jobs sit empty while high school grads line up for the university. It's just kind of making a call saying if college isn't your path, consider trade schools, consider some of these opportunities out there. I think the stat was there's over 30 million jobs in the US that pay six figures without any formal college education. So there's a lot of opportunities out there for students. The coronavirus may change college admissions forever. Again, going back to how they interact with you, can you be on their campus? Can they come see you? The change with test optional schools. College admissions officers are certainly reading tweets. That's come up here before and in other districts where a student posts something, seemingly innocuous, maybe their sophomore year. It comes back to bite them as a senior as a college learns about an offensive tweet they posted or something on social media. I've never encountered it at Grays Lake Central, but I talked to other counselors in the area. It's as bad as like parents calling the school and saying, hey, my son or daughter was not admitted, just so you know the student that was admitted, this is what they're posting on social media. It's very kind of cutthroat, so just be careful with your social media presence, and that goes for the work world as well. And then lastly, this is something that I think is really important to discuss, is talking to college students about the red zone. The red zone is, there's a statistic that shows students in their first 4 months of college, from move-in day to Thanksgiving, have the highest risk of sexual assault in their entire life. That's the time where they're adjusting to college, independence, being away from home, other variables that are in play. It's scary. So have that conversation with your son and daughter about that first 4 months. I think they said 50% of sexual assaults on a college campus happen in that timeline, from move-in day to coming home for Thanksgiving. We want to highlight just the difference in time management skills that college takes. In high school, with our block schedule now, you're in school about 35 hours a week. So your day is pretty full, activities, work in the evening, and you get your homework at night. In college, you're there about 15 hours a week. I see a student that I just talked to yesterday, and we chatted about, yeah, you're only in class 15 hours. That's very small amount of time. How are you filling that time? How are you getting involved? What are you doing proactively to look for internships or opportunities? But then also, if you don't have any assignments that are due for a week or 2 weeks, are you prepared? Are you doing the readings in advance? Are you getting your essays started? So then that third week, when everything's due at once, you've used your time wisely to be involved. The students or the friends of mine that struggled in college, intellectually were very, very intelligent, smart, but they struggled with this. They always said yes to fun events, they stayed up late playing video games, and eventually they weren't successful in college because of time management. All right, so as we transition to factors in finding the right fit, the first thing that we talk about with our students is, what location are you looking for? A lot of times our freshmen come in and they're like, send me to Hawaii, California, Florida, and then by the time the seniors, they're like, yeah, I don't want to be more than 45 hours away. I want to be close to home. I want to be in a setting where I'm comfortable, where I can get home to see family as needed. So really talking about the distance from home and the difference between being 2 to 3 hours between 6 and 7. 2 to 3 hours, you can hop in a car, and a lot of students from this area might be coming back. But if you're 5 to 6 hours away, you kind of have to plan that out. And if you're halfway across the country, now you're talking about a plane ride home in case of an emergency. The setting also makes a difference. So in some sense, it makes a difference about major. If you're studying oceanography or marine biology, being on a coastline helps, but also like city school versus small town versus like very small town. There are some great schools out there. I absolutely love Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri, but it's small. The town is about 17,000 people in whole, so there's not a lot for students other than the campus. So you just have to know as a student, am I gonna have enough to do here to kind of keep me occupied when Walmart's the shopping mall, McDonald's is the nice restaurant in town, and it's just kind of low-key and small. And then commuter campus. Not many of the schools in this area or our state, I would say, are commuter campuses, but there are certainly some. And a commuter campus just means that if you're a resident of Grays Lake and now you go to a different college and most of the people there live in the community and drive to school, but you're in a dorm, what's that experience gonna be like for you as a student? Are you gonna be bored on the weekends when everyone's gone and there's really no activities planned because it's more of a commuter campus? Facilities certainly matter, dorms, we talked about the food options, what the classrooms are offered to you. Do they have the extras? At a lot of the engineering schools out there, they have these amazing like open labs where you can just kind of occupy the space at your leisure and build. The materials are just there for you. They're not connected to a specific class. So do they have those sort of open environments? The dorms, again, they vary in size and shape and air conditioning. So if you're going south and you're in a building that's a freshman only that has no air conditioning, what's that gonna be like for your first year? Is that comfortable for you? If you have very specific food options, I'm a pretty picky eater. I actually lost weight my freshman year when they talk about like the freshman 15. I just didn't have enough food that I could access, and you can keep like Pop-Tarts and little things in your room, but there's no stoves, there's no microwaves, it was whatever the food court provided. Size of the school really impacts the learning environment. So what is the average class size, the distance across campus, and then services such as tutoring, career planning, and then of course counseling. At many schools, here as a high school student, you can drop in and see your school counselor at any time. At a college, at a large college, the wait list is about 6 weeks long from what we've heard. That was prior to COVID. During now, it could be even longer. Now, in a true emergency, you could probably get someone to meet with you. But if it's, hey, I'm just not feeling great about things, I'd like to talk to someone, but it's not at that crisis level, they said it's about 6 weeks before you see someone. At that point, you get 12 visits over the course of your 4 years, and then they refer you to the community. At a small school, we were at a nearby small school a couple years ago. The woman that was there started in about '05, had a caseload of 30 students. In 2019, had a caseload of 225 students for one person to kind of collaborate with. She had a small team with her. But you can see the mental health needs of students are growing, and you just want to make sure that if you're in an environment where you need counseling support, you can access that on a college campus. Then finally, with major selectivity of the program, many colleges have various levels of selectivity depending on what you're trying to study. So U of I, they were here earlier today for computer science, engineering, business. It's uber selective. Some of their programs, I would say it's always selective, but some of their programs are easier to be admitted to than others. And that's true across many colleges, especially in those areas of business, engineering, nursing. Direct admit programs. So for direct admit, it just means that as an incoming freshman, you have a seat in your major. Nursing is a very popular one of this. Nursing is very competitive. There's a lot of interest, but schools only have so much size and clinical hours to provide students. So they might admit you to the university and say, after your freshman year, you'll apply into the nursing program, and you might have a 50-50 shot of being admitted. If you're not, you're kind of either stuck changing majors or transferring. So if you're directly admitted as an incoming freshman, you know your seat is reserved. So again, in the areas of business, this is very popular, and also nursing. With requirements, what we mean by that is what are the requirements for your major beyond like general studies? So for some majors, you are gonna have to take a world language in college. Some you're gonna have to take more math than other classes. And for me, as a mass comm major, I was very aware of that. I knew that if I took mass comm at ISU, I had about 2 math classes to take because that was an area of struggle for me. But if I would have studied business, I would have been probably going to 6 math classes over the 4 years, including high-level calculus. So you have to be aware of your strengths and maybe some of the things that you're not as strong in. Other things to consider, activities, so what sports, clubs, Greek life are available. Internships are certainly great ways to build resumes, and then study abroad. Co-ops are a little bit different from internships. So an internship is traditional. You apply to a company, maybe this in the summertime, you work for them, hopefully get paid and build your resume, make connections. A co-op looks a little bit differently. These are often, again, popular in the engineering field, but some schools do offer them in other areas like architecture, business, fashion design. So like the University of Cincinnati is a very popular, they have the longest standing co-op program in the country. One of our staff members' daughter attends there, it's amazing. But they're at school for likely 4.5 to 5 years, and their first year was freshman year in class. First semester, their sophomore year, they were a full-time co-op student at a site, didn't take any classes, being paid about $10,000 for that co-op for that semester, and then went back to school their sophomore year, second semester. The following summer, they were back in a co-op. So when they graduate, they'll have done 3 co-ops in their time in the 4.5, 5 years at the university, and they're gonna have an amazing resume. They're also getting paid for those opportunities. So again, not all schools are gonna have like thriving co-op programs, and not all majors will offer it, but if that's something that sounds appealing, I know Marquette University has a really good one for engineering. So those are great ways to build your resume and be a very attractive candidate when you graduate. Diversity is certainly important, which could be cultural diversity, in and out of state, the male-female ratio, LGBTQ community, political, religious, socioeconomic. With political, I think it's worth pausing and just, what does that mean exactly? With any college campus, there's going to be both sides of the spectrum. And sometimes it's healthy debate, but what we found with certain schools, it's such like an active political environment that there's an agreement that you can be on either side, but you just have to take a side. Like people that don't want to get involved in debate or like, not to say argue, but like have positive and like conversations about it, kind of feel left out because it's just a very active student body. They're interested in the political world, they want to hear other opinions, they want to talk about it. So sometimes students are like, well, this is just, I just want to come take classes, and now I'm caught up in all these sort of like big picture debates, or there's things happening on campus that I don't really want to be involved in, and now I'm uncomfortable. So just be, again, thinking about that when you visit schools. Cost, of course, is a family discussion. There are public and private sticker prices, which are not necessarily final prices. So we're going to talk a little bit more about financial aid. But again, just be understanding that what says a sticker price, and there are many colleges now that their sticker price is in the $70,000 range. That's not what everyone pays. Some students pay that much. Many get half that reduced due to scholarships, financial aid, so it becomes more reasonable, and you're looking at what would be the cost of an in-state public school at an out-of-state private school because of scholarship opportunities. You have to be thinking about grad school. If you're considering like an MBA or continuing on to pre-med or pre-law, what can you do to save on your undergrad experience to then have money and resources for graduate school? Because there's less opportunities for scholarships at that point, costs can be higher, and you don't want to amass so much debt in those undergrad years where you're not paying that back throughout the entire part of your life. CLC is a great savings option. We talked a little bit about just attending CLC full-time. They have an amazing program called CLC Scholars. So students with a 3.5 GPA or above and about a 1250 SAT, these are averages, not requirements, can apply to CLC Scholars. And if you're admitted to that program, there is a one-page additional like application and essay. You receive free tuition, free books, free fees for up to 2 years. So you can go to CLC, get all your gen eds out of the way, and not really pay anything out of pocket to attend through that program. For those of you that are like 100% sure going to four-year school, don't look at CLC as still not a secondary choice for a class. You could take Intro to Psychology at CLC that would be transferable to almost any college in the US for $400 instead of $1,000 at that four-year college. I've had many students that are attending some of the most prestigious schools in the country come back in the summer and take a gen ed course at CLC and have no problem transferring that back over to their college. So it's definitely a great program to consider. All right, how to apply. I'm just going to check our time. We're doing good here. So how to apply. You can still go to the college's website. The Common App is probably the most popular way our students are applying. Common App has been around for quite a while now. When I started counseling in 2010, I think there were under 200 members. Now there's over 900 schools that are members of Common App. It's a free form to create. You still have to pay the application fee if they have them. But you would work through the Common application. It's lengthy. There is some depth to it. But you would work through it, and then you can apply to multiple schools using one application instead of doing it through 6 or 7 different websites with the same information. The Coalition app is a little bit newer. Many of the schools that are Coalition app are also Common App. I think there's only 2 in the country right now that are exclusively Coalition app. I believe University of Washington is one, and possibly University of Maryland. They might have changed though. So as you're going through, I think Common App is really the most realistically way that students are going to apply, or through the college website. If you get to the point of creating a Coalition app, talk with your counselor and we'll help you through that. But for more often than not, the Common App or the website itself will be fine. You will complete a transcript release form. In the next slide, I'll show you what that looks like. It's available both in Naviance and on our website, one for each college you're applying to. There's typically about a 5-day turnaround, just as we get many of them at once. Our registrar has to go in electronically, send those to the college. So being, again, aware that November 1st is a very popular deadline. So if we get 200 transcripts on requests on October 30th, it's going to be hard to turn that around before November 1st. Asking for an unofficial transcript. As you're meeting with your counselor, I've been handing students their unofficial transcript. You can certainly ask your counselor as well. Many schools are now what's called on a self-report. So instead of you apply, we send transcript, and then the process kind of handled, they want you to self-report your grades within the application itself. So the unofficial transcript allows you to kind of go through that steps and do that. Logging into Naviance, waiving your FERPA rights. FERPA stands for the Family Educational Rights Privacy Act. So within the Common App, you have to basically sign off and say, we're going to allow I'm going to allow the school to send these documents on my behalf. It can be a little confusing, so again, utilize your counselor and we'll walk you through the steps. I've made some videos that we're going to share out that kind of show you step by step on how to do that. Letters of recommendation. Some schools need recommendations, others don't. So the first step would be talking to a teacher, seeing if they're willing to write a letter of rec on your behalf, allowing them at least 2 weeks for completion. There's a survey in Naviance that you can also fill out. As soon as you sign into Naviance, it's kind of highlighted there for you. You can fill out that 15-question survey, just a little bit more background information about who you are as a student, and then you can kind of send that off to the teacher. They'll be able to see those answers. And then you'll submit your request officially through Naviance to those direct teachers to then actually go in and have them apply and fill it out for you and send the letter of recommendation. So that's all something that you can get help with. It can be confusing when you're doing Common App or the websites and now you're in Naviance, so please utilize your counselor for that support. And then follow up with the teacher. If you've given them 2 weeks and you haven't heard back from them or there's nothing that's sent, it's okay to send them like a nice email and say, hey, Mr. Stark, I was just checking back in with you. Are you still planning to send that letter soon? There's nothing wrong with that, or pass them in the hallway. Requesting test scores from SAT or ACT. So again, the first decision you have to make is, are you applying with test scores? If you are, then many colleges are going to require them directly through College Board or through ACT. We don't post test scores on our transcript, and many schools wouldn't accept them even if we did. So you'd have to go through College Board and send those scores, or through ACT. And again, colleges take either test. They don't have a preference. We've had students be more successful on one versus the other. So maybe they score on like the 60th percentile on one test, 85th percentile on another, and they send whichever they're higher on or more comfortable with. This is just like page 1 of our official transcript release form. The website's at top. Again, you can access through our College and Career Center page on our website or just by logging into Naviance. What are a couple frequently asked questions? We talked about self-reporting. So this has become a more popular trend with self-report. Many schools want you to self-report now, and then if you're admitted to that school and choose to attend there, finally get around to sending the transcript after graduation. So for example, the University of Illinois, if you apply through Common App for U of I, which is the first year you can do it, it just created September 1st, U of I is the first time they're on Common App. It's a little bit clunky, I would say. You could do the Common App, but they don't have it set up to where you can self-report through Common App. So you would still need to go into your MyIllini account and fill out this self-report. So for that school, I would just say, just do the whole application through the MyIllini. Most schools, if they're asking for a self-report, it's just directly through Common App or through their website. You don't have to go to 2 places. For College Board, if you lost your login information and you want to send those scores, unfortunately, we don't have access to that login. That's confidential, so we'd have to go through like the retrieval process through College Board to get that. And usually within a couple days, you'll hear back from someone there. If only one of your schools on your list uses the Common App, should you use it? I would lean towards no, as long as you can apply through their website. If you have 2 or more, it can be a time saver. But again, the Common App is a very lengthy document. So if you only have the one school and you might be able to apply through their website quicker, then I don't know that you need to necessarily use Common App. Asking teachers for letter rec if a school doesn't need one. There are many colleges that don't accept letters of recommendation or don't require them. So please be aware that your teachers are extremely busy. They're teaching, they're figuring out this new block schedule. You don't want to make them take the time to write an hour-long letter rec if the college isn't going to accept it. I'm sure they'll be willing if you need it for a scholarship or something else, of course, but if none of your schools need a letter rec, or if you're starting at CLC, they're not going to need a letter rec. Don't, just be mindful, like, okay, I can just apply without that. I don't need a teacher. Your counselor automatically writes letters of rec through the Common App if you're using that, so you won't necessarily need to send us a request. We'll just get it when you submit your transcript release form. Senior grades, this is kind of like a myth that they don't matter. They certainly do. You are going to be admitted likely based on everything through junior year. if you're applying to some schools that sort of need more time, they're going to wait and see what happens this semester with your grades. So maybe you're like right on the fence for an admit or denial. They will wait to see in January what your grades look like. So senior year grades do matter. Worst case scenario for students is we've had students apply, get accepted in November, come back second semester, and they just sort of get that senioritis, and they kind of turn it off for a period of time or drop a class that's critical to their major. Students can rescind colleges can rescind admission. It's rare, and if it's due to other variables, other circumstances, we can explain that. But if it's simply, I got disinterested and my grades went from B's to D's, be aware that you could find out in May that your admission is no longer valid. When should you start working on this? Probably soon. Some of the college applications do take a while. Essays have to be written, read, revised, get feedback on, so the sooner the better in most cases. A couple of things about deadlines. So regular decision is just sort of the full timeline that you can apply to a college. So if it's open August 1st, it closes March 1st, that's your regular decision timeline. We gave the example of the University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League college, extremely hard for admission. It's about a 7% admit rate for that school and similar schools to them. Early decision is a binding agreement between a student and a college for admission. You can only apply to one college early decision, and not many schools offer it. It tends to be those like most highly selective. The reason we put the numbers for Penn is they're kind of universal, similarly to most colleges, but you can see the admit rate for early decision goes up to 19%. So it slightly increases the student's odds at these highly selective schools, but it is binding. So if you apply early decision to Penn and you have 4 other schools on your list and they tell you in December that you're admitted, you don't get to wait to hear from those other colleges. You have to kind of pull your applications at that time, say thank you, I've been accepted to a different school. So it is a big family decision. Obviously financially, you want to be comfortable knowing that you can pay for that school as well, but it can increase the likelihood for admission, so it's something to consider. Early action is similar sounding to early decision, but is really just a priority deadline. You'll usually find out your admissions decision earlier if you apply early action, and it tends to be also a scholarship deadline, a merit-based scholarship for a lot of schools. So we highly encourage students, if they have an early action deadline of like November 1st, November 15th, December 1st, to apply early. There's really no downside. If we think of the chairs in this room are the beds in a college, the college wants to start filling those beds as soon as possible. They want to make sure that their freshman class is going to hit their mark because there's financial reasons behind that. So they're going to admit students early on to try to start filling that class, meaning that if there's 500 seats in this room or 500 beds at that college, by the time the regular decision deadline comes, there only might be 200 left because those seats have started to be filled. So your odds just decrease a little bit and they can be more selective at that point. The other part of it is at many schools, if you apply by their early action deadline of say November 1st, you'll start hearing in mid-December the outcome of your decision, where if you apply say December 1st, which is their final deadline, you could have to wait till February or March to find out. So it just kind of delays everything in the long run. Rolling admissions is kind of like it sounds. They make decisions on a rolling basis. So if there's a student that applies, their committee meets, they make a decision, and you find out within a couple weeks rolling. And then open admission is just general, open to everyone. CLC is an example of that. There are some requirements for CLC in terms of English and math proficiency, but generally speaking, anyone can attend CLC. What do they look at? Of course, GPA and rigor courses. We've talked about SAT, ACT scores, essays and personal statement if they ask for them, letters of recommendation if they ask for them, what have you been involved with at school, any community service or leadership experience. Demonstrated interest is another like hot button issue. Demonstrated interest is, has the student shown they're interested in coming to our school? Have they attended the rep visit when they were at GCHS? Have you gone to campus and visit? That's tricky because right now during COVID, people are hesitant or the colleges have been closed. So a lot of schools are going away from demonstrated interest as a variable in the equation, and most schools never considered it. They just look at the kind of the grades, the student as a whole, and don't worry about have you visited or not. The outcomes are definitely worth highlighting though. So you can be admitted, congratulations, that's exciting. Denied can be hard to hear, but great students are denied to some tough schools. Deferred, as we talked about, means they need more time. They're not ready to make a decision on you, so you apply, say November, you hear in December that they need more time, so they'll kind of give you an answer in February. So it just means they need more time, they might ask for those 7th semester grades. Waitlisted is similar in a way, but a little bit different. So waitlisted, some schools have wait lists that are over 300-400 students long. They don't want to deny you, so they're kind of, you're under consideration still, but they've filled their freshman class, and if students start changing their minds, so we get to like May, June, circumstances change, maybe 5 people go to a different college or decide that that's not the school they want to attend anymore, they could call you and say, you know, you weren't admitted, but now we're willing to offer you a spot off the wait list. What do you want to do? And that can be stressful. Again, this becomes like an 8, 9, 10-month process. If you apply in November, you're in January told we're deferring you till March. In March, you're told you're added to the wait list. And now in, say, June, you're already committed to another college. The college of your dreams calls you and says, you have a spot off the wait list. Do you want it? That can be stressful. So, you know, it's nice not hearing no, but it does prolong sort of the agony of the wait. So just understand, many schools will do this. And for deferred and waitlisted, I will say they tend to be at the highly selective colleges. Many schools, they're going to know right away that you're admitted or denied. But for those schools that have 50,000 applications for 1,500 seats, they tend to use the deferred or waitlist process to kind of hold on to the students for as long as they can. Financial aid, we're not going to go into great detail on because we have the presentation coming, but speak to the financial aid officers at your school. There's 2 types of form, the FAFSA, which again opens October 1st. There is a graduation requirement now for the second year in Illinois to either file the FAFSA or turn in a opt-out form. So I don't know if that's changed at all, but that was something the state kind of mandated last year, that you either have to fill it out or we need an opt-out form from you. And then the CSS profile, if necessary, is a more in-depth look at the family's financial picture. Again, tends to be very highly selective schools that might ask for it, and you may never have to worry about the CSS profile. If you're in a situation where you're wondering, should we fill out the FAFSA? Maybe we're doing pretty well, we're not going to get any aid. 1, it's a grad requirement, so fill it out. And 2, it's good for merit-based scholarships. They might kind of look at those numbers to see what you're considering for. Maybe circumstances change. If a parent loses a job, they can retroactively look back at the FAFSA and figure out how to support you. Of course, scholarships, on the right-hand side, you have different national search engines. I would say the best way to look for local scholarships is through Naviance. Ms. Marquardt does a great job posting local scholarships, so please, you know, encourage you to fill those out. A couple of scholarship myths. The idea that only straight A students get scholarships, that's not the case. Doesn't only one student end up winning them? The amounts are too low. What's good of $500 or $1,000 when you owe $50K, that you have to be an athlete. So to kind of like bust those myths, many scholarships, they just need a 2.0 or above to apply. Out of the 100 plus that will be added to Naviance, sometimes there's only a few that are for athletes. Many local scholarships only get 2 or 3 applications. There's been times in the past where we got 1 application for a $2,000 scholarship, and that student filled it out the day of before it was due and didn't have to do anything else and got $2,000. Funds can be used for gas, books, so every little bit counts, and sort of the idea of you can't win unless you try. So apply and see what you can maybe get towards May when we release those scholarships. Couple events to highlight before I turn it over. College representative visits are happening. We have, after last year where everything was virtual, our rep visit schedule Ms. Marquardt sends out. We have so many college reps coming into GCHS during the day, doing some evening presentations on Zoom. So please check out those schools and hear what they have to say. It might be a school that you don't know a ton about, but all of a sudden they tell you about a scholarship or a program that sounds really appealing to you. In addition, we offer application essay workshops. So these are before and after school opportunities with Ms. Przanowski and other counselors with our English department. And you would just send them an email and say, hey, I want to get a little help on this essay or the application. Can we meet for 25 minutes? And these are going to continue into November, so a long time. In addition to that, we have Wednesday night counseling, which we're happy to bring back. These are 30-minute appointments with students and families with me. So you would just shoot me an email, say, hey, Mr. Goldman, we do have some additional questions. Can we sit down and talk, whether it's on Zoom or in person, about the latest and get some more help? And if you have underclassmen that aren't seniors, Wednesday night counseling applies to those students as well, whether it's college career related or 4-year planning for what classes they want to take in high school. As we get into like 8th grade course selection, if you have an 8th grader, we do those meetings then as well. Couple other things, through Round Lake High School and the University Center of Lake County, there's a program on Saturday, Families and Education. It's a bilingual virtual event for learning about the higher education process. This Monday, our seniors are going to attend a FAFSA presentation during the Rams block, which will be great for them to hear. And then Alexis, who's our rep from ISAC, is also going to be doing a live stream financial aid again next Wednesday evening. There is a great program through McHenry. The Manufacturing Trade and Industry Career Expo is on October 6th. There's a large group of trade school programs and career programs that are going to be presenting, and it's sort of like a job fair, career fair, where you can walk through, and if you have any questions about that, just shoot me an email and I'll send you the flyer. Two other things to promote. We're crossing our fingers that by October 14th, we can still have an in-person college fair at CLC. Usually over 140 schools or so attend. It's from 6 to 8 p.m. in their kind of field house area. The link there shows you on their website what schools plan to be in attendance. I'll be there along with counselors from the community and just like the Lake County area in general, directing families if you have any questions. And then finally, our Choices Fair is for students with learning differences. So if you're a student with a 504, an IEP, there's a great fair through the post-secondary group that's going to be virtual this year where you can hear about programs available. Real quickly, just follow your counselors on Twitter. I would say one to highlight would be Miss Marquardt, because she's the one that posts the most college information that comes her way. And then finally, I think we did okay on time. We're at 7:45. Jack is here from ISAC. He's going to come up and do about a 20-minute presentation on financial aid to get you familiar with some of the terms. Then we'll be available for either group questions or individual questions. And again, more information is coming Monday to the seniors about financial aid, and then next Wednesday evening is about opportunity as well. So I thank you guys for your attention. I'm definitely excited to talk about this with an audience, and again, people listening online, thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Jack.
All right, awesome. All right, well, thank you all for joining me here tonight. My name is Jack Hosek, and I am from the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, or ISAC. So at ISAC, our purpose is to provide Illinois students with information and assistance to help make educational beyond high school and affordable. We are essentially the state agency that deals with college access and financial aid. So, starting into our topic for tonight, what is financial aid? So, financial aid is borrowed, given, or earned money that can be obtained from various sources to help pay for college. And this is money that can help pay for not just four-year universities, but also things like community college and trade schools, also grad school when you get there. But the purpose of financial aid is to make college affordable for you. It's intended to make up the difference between what you can afford to pay and what the college actually costs. So we have two basic categories of financial aid. We have gift aid, which is money that you don't have to pay back or earn, and then you also have self-help aid. So gift aid is going to be grants, scholarships, and we'll talk about all of these more in depth. And then in self-help aid, you're going to have loans and work study. As far as work study goes, this is a little bit of a different type of financial aid than the others, because it's basically you are earning your financial aid through a job on campus. So how it works is the federal government will give money to colleges and universities in order to employ that student on campus. Sometimes there's off-campus jobs, but they're mostly on campus. It is necessary to have a completed FAFSA, so you need to demonstrate financial need in order to be eligible for this type of financial aid. It's also important to note that deadlines do apply and funds are limited at these colleges. So that means jobs are limited. So if you do qualify for federal work study, it's important that if you want to take advantage of that, you're reaching out to the university and understanding what jobs you can fill in order to earn the money in order to get this aid. The jobs themselves are at least going to be the current federal minimum wage, and they're also pretty sweet gigs if you can get them. A lot of the time they are sitting at desks, whether it's dorm buildings or libraries, checking people in and out. I know at the college I attended, they were oftentimes, the students used that time to also do homework while they were checking people in and out, so it's a pretty great thing if you can get it. So going on to the other types of financial aid, you have financial aid that's from the federal government, state government, the college itself, we call that institutional aid, and then outside and private sources. For this presentation, we're going to be mostly handling federal and state aid, but just keep in mind that there are those other places where you can get aid. So as far as state and federal financial aid go, for state aid, a good website is going to be ISAC at www.isac.org. And then for federal financial aid, you can always go to the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid. These will offer a lot more information in depth on the types of aid that you can apply for. And yeah, so then going on to the grants. Grants, like I mentioned before, are a type of gift aid, so you don't have to pay them back or earn them. And when you've completed FAFSA, you are going to be applying mostly for these two big grants, the MAP grant, or the Monetary Award Program grant, and the Pell Grant. The MAP grant is the biggest grant that can come from the state of Illinois, while the Pell Grant is the biggest grant that can come from the federal government. As you can see, with the MAP grant, you can earn up to $5,496, and with the Pell Grant, you can earn up to, or be eligible for up to $6,495 with a total of $11,991. I'm always really glad they put that at the bottom of the screen because I'm bad at math, so I would not be able to add those up by myself, but you can see that's a pretty good amount of money, and this is going to be money that you can be eligible for every year. Before we get into loans really quick, I forgot one thing to mention about grants. There are other smaller grants that the state and federal government offer. They're very specific to certain circumstances, so I'm not going to go over them tonight. Alexis next week, when he does a more in-depth financial aid process presentation, will go over the smaller grants as well. But just know they are available, and if you want to learn more about that before Alexis presents, you can always go to those websites I mentioned before. All right, so going into loans. So when you're evaluating loan options, it's important to first consider the source of the loan, whether that's coming from the federal government or a private source. When it comes to federal loans, you want to consider whether they are subsidized versus or unsubsidized, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. You also want to keep in mind the interest rate, because obviously that's going to affect how much you pay back in the long run. And then also, you want to keep in mind the repayment options and grace period on these loans. As far as federal loans go, there are two types of federal student loans. There's subsidized and unsubsidized loans. So the biggest difference between these two is when the interest will begin to accrue. For subsidized loans, the interest on those loans doesn't begin to accrue until you have graduated college. So if you take a loan out your freshman year of college, the interest won't begin to accrue until you're done with that program. For unsubsidized loans, the interest begins to accrue directly after you take out that loan. So if you take out a loan your freshman year, right after you take out that loan, that's when the interest will start to accrue. For subsidized loans, they are also need-based, where unsubsidized loans are not need-based, so anybody can take out unsubsidized loans. So then how you're going to be applying for these financial aid grants, loans, scholarships, stuff like that, you're going to be filling out, for the most part, the FAFSA. In special circumstances, you might fill out the alternative application for Illinois, and we'll talk a little about that a little bit later. And then it's also important, though, because some colleges might require you to fill out other forms, like the CSS profile that we mentioned a little bit earlier. So it's important to be communicating with the college to find out exactly what's required for a complete financial aid application. So going into the FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. The first thing I'll direct your attention to is the free part, so you should never be filling out this application, paying money to fill out this application. If you find yourself ever doing that, whether you're talking with somebody or on a website, run away from that as fast as possible. But the FAFSA is going to be what most students are going to be filling out to apply for both state and federal financial aid. Some colleges will also use it toward institutional aid, and then again, this application is available at no cost. You then have the alternative application for Illinois. This is a little bit different. It is only for students to fill out who don't qualify for federal financial aid, but will still qualify for state financial aid. So a good example of this is undocumented students. They don't qualify for federal, but they will qualify for state financial aid. And because they don't qualify for federal financial aid, they can't fill out the FAFSA, so they need an application, and that's where the alternative application came for. You should only be filling out one or the other, and again, most students will be filling out the FAFSA. Some colleges will also use it toward institutional aid like the FAFSA, and like the FAFSA as well, this application is available at no cost. So a little bit more information about both applications. They both open October 1st, and it's important to fill that out as soon as possible, just because some grants are time sensitive. There's especially the Monetary Award Program. This is a grant that's an appropriation, so there's a limited amount of money that's put aside, and so it's first come, first serve. The people who should be filling out these applications are going to be high school seniors and college students. You do need to reapply every year. How you'll get to them is through these links, the FAFSA.gov and then isac.org/alternative app. And then these applications are used to determine eligibility for federal and state aid programs. And then also, like I said before, some institutions may also use these toward institutional aid. So as far as what information you're going to be putting on these, there's going to be both a parent section and a student section that will ask both personal and financial information. As far as parents go on the FAFSA and alternative application, it gets a little tricky. So most students have to report parental information until the age of 24. There are only certain circumstances where you might not, before you turn 24, have to report parental information, but most students will. For financial aid purposes, there are only going to be 3 types of parents. There's going to be biological parents, adoptive parents, and step parents only if they're married to the biological parent. So this means that no one else besides those 3 categories should be putting their information in the parental category. This includes legal guardians, so if a student lives with their grandmother that has not legally adopted them, but is just their legal guardian, they would not be able to put grandma's information, they would still have to put parental information. Divorce is another thing that gets a little complicated on the FAFSA and alternative application. For parents that are divorced, the student only has to report the information of the parent with whom the student has lived with the most in the past 12 months. So they don't have to report both parents' information. As far as the other information that's going to be needed, so you're going to, on the FAFSA only, need a social security number. Parents who don't have a social security number will just enter zeros. If a student doesn't have a social security number, but they're still an eligible non-citizen, they'll need an alien registration number. And then you're also going to need a federal student aid ID or FSA ID to sign the FAFSA electronically, and we'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. As far as financial information that's going to be needed on the FAFSA and alternative application, you're going to need federal tax returns, W-2s, and other records of income. You're also going to need banking statements and records of investments if this applies to you. Not everyone has investments. Records of untaxed income you're going to need, again, if that applies to you. And then you're also going to need a list of colleges that the student would like to attend. This is because the FAFSA sends the information that is recorded to those colleges so that they can put together a financial aid packet for you. As far as how you sign these applications, on the FAFSA, it's a little bit more complicated. You're going to need an FSA ID to sign the FAFSA electronically. Both students and parents have to have their own separate ID. The FAFSA or the FSA ID is going to be needed to renew the FAFSA every year, and in order to create an FSA ID, you're going to need a social security number, and it'll also ask you for some other information. If you're a parent who does not have a social security number, then you won't be able to create an FSA ID, but what you can do instead is print out a signature page, sign it, and then send it where it tells you to. For the alternative application, it's a little bit easier to sign it. All that is needed is a PIN. Like the FAFSA, students and parents must have their own PIN in order to sign it. The PIN will be generated and sent via email by the Student Assistance Commission, and then a PIN, just like the FSA ID and the FAFSA, is needed every time you need to renew the alternative app. In order to obtain a PIN, all you need is an email. So after you input the information into the FAFSA or alternative application and hit submit, what it will do is generate an expected family contribution number. This is the amount a student or family can be expected to pay or to contribute financially in one academic year. And it is going to be used to determine a student's eligibility for most federal and state financial aid programs. What also might happen is after you submit the FAFSA or alternative application, you might also be selected by the university whom the information you sent to for verification. This is a process, it's a very common process, that is used by schools to confirm that the data reported on the application that you submitted is accurate. It doesn't mean necessarily that you've done anything wrong on these applications. Honestly, some schools will just randomly select students. For example, I was not selected for verification my freshman through junior year of college, but then my senior year I was selected for verification. None of my information had changed. I had just been randomly selected. So what happens? If you are selected for verification, you might be asked to submit additional documentation such as tax returns, transcripts, W-2s, income information, or a list of members of the household. This is not cause to panic. Just make sure that you submit all documents on time and only provide the information that's requested. So, how a college will calculate your financial need, or the money that you are going to need in financial aid to be able to attend the school, is they will take the cost of attendance of the university and will subtract the expected family contribution number that's generated by the FAFSA or alternative app. This will equal your financial need, or again, the money that you need in order to attend the school. So then what will happen is that the colleges will take that financial need information and they will package all available financial aid that you're eligible for in the best way possible in order to meet that financial need and send it to you. So when you're reviewing these financial aid offers, it's important to, first of all, what I always tell students is consider, was your financial need met? Do you have any out-of-pocket cost? You also want to know in that financial aid offer what types of aid are included. Not all financial aid offers are created equal. Some schools are really good about laying out exactly what scholarships and financial aid you are eligible for, while other schools will just kind of give it to you in a lump sum and you kind of have to do a little bit more digging. You're also going to want to keep in mind what the total cost of attendance is and what your financial aid eligibility was as well. So as far as some quick tips and reminders before we wrap up, it's important to complete the FAFSA or alternative application as soon as possible after October 1st. It's important to note, too, that the information reported on the FAFSA is confidential and only used to determine financial aid eligibility. The federal government's not going to use your information for any other purposes. You might be asked to complete verification and submit additional documentation, so keep that in mind. Supplemental applications or forms may be required, like the CSS profile, in order to complete your financial aid application. It's really important to keep track of the deadlines. All schools have their own deadlines for financial aid applications. And keep a copy of everything you submit and reapply every year. So if you do need a quick answer to any financial aid questions, you can always text with experts from ISAC. What you'll do is just pick the area code closest to your name, or closest to you, and text your name. You'll then be led through some preliminary questions and be able to text with financial aid expert. You can also reach out to Alexis, who is the ISAC rep for your guys' school. And yeah, that's going to conclude my part of the presentation. Thank you, guys.
So thank you to Jack. It's great information and a very nice overview. A couple of things in regards to financial aid of what it looks like at Grays Lake Central. So again, there's more information coming next week. But these are general overviews for all families. If you get into a situation where there's unique circumstances or there's more like prolonged questions, maybe divorce or a small business ownership, like you have a full-time job but then you have a side business and it gets complicated, you'll be able to make appointments with Alexis through Zoom or possibly in person to bring in some of those documents and sit down with him and actually kind of figure it out together. Many families are able to hop on October 1st and kind of just go through the IRS data retrieval tool and get the FAFSA submitted, but just know you're not alone. There's a lot of support available. The ISAC service is free, so we will utilize Alexis throughout the course of the school year. One other thing about scholarships and grants, is make sure they're renewable. You know, grants are not merit-based, they're need-based, but sometimes they'll throw in a grant for your freshman year or a scholarship that's to kind of entice you to get you, but it's not renewable. It's a one-time offer of say like $15,000. If that goes away for sophomore year, how are you covering that cost, you know, additionally? That's a lot on the family to cover. Many scholarships, especially academic scholarships, are renewable as long as you maintain a certain GPA. But again, you just want to really kind of look through that financial aid document to figure out what they're telling you is fully truthful in terms of all 4 years, or are they just trying to get you there and now you're feeling stuck moving forward. So with that being said, one other thing I want to mention about colleges. So we talked about different shapes and sizes and everything related to that. Some students, it's just like, it's too overwhelming. Like the idea of taking 5 classes at once. There are 2 colleges in the country, Cornell College in Iowa and Colorado College, that are small liberal arts colleges that are, you take 1 class at a time for 3.5 weeks, and then you move on to the next class for all 4 years. So if a student struggles with like executive functioning, organizational skills, you could go to Colorado College or Cornell College and literally take a class from August till 3rd week of September and be done with that class and move on to the next one for another 3.5 weeks. So you're kind of like fully ingrained in that class, but if it's not a course you're enjoying, then you're done with it 3.5 weeks later and you kind of move on. So the only other thing I'd say is I'm going to give a shout out. My dad texted, said, hey, no mention of UW-Madison. He's a Badger alum, so he's watching online. So with that, we'll open it up to questions, either for the group of the audience, or you guys can come up individually and ask questions. Any specific questions, whether it be college career related or financial aid? And if not, it's okay. Yeah, so the whole presentation tonight was recorded through the live stream, and the actual just like presentation itself will be on our website. Yeah.
For the 2 scholarships or grants, the math and the other one, is the math one for only everywhere state? Is it only for state, like state schools in Illinois, or can you take that out outside the state?
That's a great question. Yeah, so it's only going to be available for Illinois state schools, yeah. And other schools around, not just like Illinois state schools, but like only schools in Illinois.
And the difference between, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the difference between the MAP and the Pell is timeline. So the Pell grant is a national grant where as long as you apply to FAFSA and you're eligible, you can receive up to the maximum amount if that's what you're eligible for. The MAP grant, there's like a finite number of dollars set aside that once that money is gone by the students that have applied first, you might be eligible, but if you don't apply for FAFSA till March, that resource is no longer available because it's like a state budget. Yeah.
Once you complete the FAFSA application submission, is it okay? You can go ahead and change the college.
Yeah, so I get that question a lot. Yeah, you can always go back in and change the colleges that you've listed on the FAFSA and resubmit it, and it'll send that information to those additional colleges.
And the other part about the financial aid award letters is you may be accepted to a college in November, December, receive a merit-based scholarship offer as part of your admittance. That's separately from FAFSA. Oftentimes financial aid award letters aren't coming until February or March, so there's a bit of a delay. Like first semester is apply, find out if you're accepted, maybe visit, and then second semester financial aid letters start rolling in, and that's where the family can sit down and kind of compare and contrast costs and ultimately decide what's the best value, what's best for our family. One important part with financial aid, and we try to talk about the students, is you take this like full cost of admission, what you may receive in merit-based or grant money, which is free, the loan offer in the students' names, when you talked about the subsidized and unsubsidized loan, those are in the students' names, but the government caps them for freshman year, caps them for sophomore year, junior year, like incrementally goes up a little bit. But if there's a remaining balance, the parents might be able to contribute to some of that balance, but if you can't cover the full price, students can't borrow more in their name from the federal government process. It's going to be what's called a Parent Plus loan in the parent's name as a co-signer, and prior to COVID, that interest rate was about double the interest rate for the students. It's kind of changed right now for COVID. I think a lot of interest rates were at least temporarily paused, but just be mindful that we understand college is expensive. If there's a $30,000 bill, parents might not be able to write a check for that, but if they can pay part, you could consider a Parent Plus loan
on top of that. But if you're getting to the point of borrowing $30,000 for 1 year, and you're gonna have $60, $70, $80,000 in debt at the end of the 4-year school, I would argue consider other options to make it more affordable. There's an amazing director of financial aid at Lake Forest College that has been doing it for 30 plus years, is a very popular speaker in this area. He's always told families, when you graduate, if you have $30,000 or less in debt, that's like the number he's comfortable with. Yeah.
I did not grow up in this country. I did not go to undergrad school in this country, so all this is pretty overwhelming. But I just have a fundamental question. Why does the state care about FAFSA so much that it is a graduation requirement? It seems very counterintuitive to me that you have to fill out a financial aid requirement to graduate. So
Good question. I think here's what I've interpreted, because people were scrambling last year to either get these opt-out forms filled or make sure the students find it. It ultimately comes back to access for students. Here, we have college nights, we have counselors, we have Access to ISAC, and ISAC's a statewide organization, but in many parts of the state, they don't have access to college counseling support, and families weren't even aware of the FAFSA. They didn't know it existed, so they weren't filling out the form. The state, by making a graduation requirement, is kind of putting on the schools to make sure families know about it. Doesn't mean that you have to fill it out, but at least if you're opting out, you said, we've been given this information, we're aware that the FAFSA exists, so we have the choice to either fill it out or not fill it out. So it really came down to, in certain parts or certain districts, many families were never informed, or they just didn't have access to the information. So this is the state's way of making sure they have access to it. So I think the intent is good. It's just, it takes time to fill it out, or the opt-out form is one signature, it's very quick. Does that make sense?
yeah, thank you. That is helpful. And the underlying, I guess, the point of getting something through FAFSA or not is primarily your parents or the child's parents' financial status.
Yes.
So is it fair to say that it's mostly need-based?
It's 100% need-based, yeah. It's not based on merit.
Is there a cutoff, like you know by average over the years, how much a parent's income will be? So is there any like boundaries that we can know?
It's hard to say because it's based school by school based on their cost of admission, so it can vary. Like what you receive from one school could be different from another. But I would say generally speaking, it's pretty hard to receive grants. Like everyone can be somewhat eligible for loans, but grants, it's challenging. You know, it's a limited number of students that are, I would say, qualifying for the full MAP grant or the full Pell. Some certainly do, and it's great that they have access to those resources, but paying for college as like a solidly middle-class family can be hard because you're not necessarily going to get grants. You may or may not get financial aid like through merit-based scholarships. So how do you account for $40,000 a year for a school?
Yeah, I would add one more thing to that answer is like another thing that the FAFSA takes into consideration. The FAFSA overall takes into consideration so much information, and that's also why it's hard to just give you like, oh, if you make this above this amount, you're not going to be eligible, because it takes into account investments and different properties you have, how many kids you have, how many kids in college you have, stuff like that. And that's also why local scholarships, which we talked a little bit about before, is really important, because so much money in local scholarships that people just aren't aware of go to waste. I mean, like he said, like sometimes like one applicant, sometimes 0 applicants fill out an application for a local scholarship. And while the money doesn't tend to be as much as like a national scholarship, if you have, you know, if you fill out 10 applications and receive 10 scholarships worth $500, that ends up being a lot of money in the long run. And a lot of these applications don't even take that long to fill out. So it can be really helpful if you don't think you're going to get any money or a lot of money from FAFSA to look more into these local scholarships as well.
Grizzly Central over the years, do you have any data on how many percentage of students got anything from FAFSA versus local scholarships? Is there any actual numerical data?
So like we get a report from the state on students that are Pell eligible or not. How much they received in Pell, we don't always find out. so we don't have that data, I don't believe. Local scholarships are like truly grades like Central or District 127, so someone's receiving those as long as there's applications. And there's an awards night for seniors in May where those are handed out. So you have to apply, and then if you're invited to the awards night, some students will walk out of here with $250, some will walk out with a couple thousand based on what they apply for, who selects them. They're not usually Grades Lake Central scholarships. They're eligible for our students, but they're community-based organizations. So like Grades Lake Youth Baseball, Softball, the Chamber of Commerce, like different groups, the Rotary Club, and you'll apply, maybe write an essay, and then their team decides who gets the scholarship. Yeah.
So, is it hard and fast on that FAFSA that you need the previous year's taxes?
Yeah, so it's the prior year. So for this, so because you're applying for the 2022-2023 school year, it's going to be prior to that. So you're going to need your 2020 tax returns.
And what if it's not done?
So if the tax returns isn't done, then the tax returns have to be finished before you can apply for the FAFSA. Unless you're not required to fill out tax returns.
Yep.
Just wanted to verify that a friend of mine, her sons were very lucky and got full scholarships at the school they went to, but she still had to fill out the FAFSA. So just wanted to make sure that that's
Yeah,
a
that's,
requirement.
again, the full scholarship was merit-based probably,
Yeah.
but a lot of the colleges still want the financial picture to award those merits, even though it's based on grades. So I think you'll see that often is that you're eligible for this merit-based scholarship academic reasons or athletic reasons, but we still want you to file the FAFSA just so we have the academic, the whole picture, the whole financial picture is attached to it. So that's where, again, I think there's no downside to filling it out. They also will tell us that, again, a family might be on the high income level and not be eligible for grants, but something happens. There's a tragedy of some sorts or a loss of job, and they can retroactively award you the MAP or Pell Grant as long as they have it on file. Yeah.
So the FAFSA has to be filled out every year, right? For every student every year?
Exactly, yeah. So you'll do it October 1st each year. And those numbers that we talked about with the loans, that's per 1 year. So they can borrow, or they can qualify for like the Pell Grant up to around $6,000 for freshman year. As long as the family's financial picture stays somewhat similar, they'll probably be eligible for something similar their next year. And then the subsidized and unsubsidized loan amounts that start for freshmen, I think incrementally go up by like $1,000 each year that they can borrow up until their senior year. And then as you get older and you're considering grad school, you can continue to fill out the FAFSA. Yep. Yeah, so there are times where you fill out the FAFSA, say October 1st or October 10th, and based on the family's financial picture, you're not eligible for grants. Like, make too much money, you have enough resources, and you're not eligible, but something happens along the way. Say in December, a spouse loses their job and it changes the picture. Obviously, the taxes don't change from like the prior year, but the family's financial picture does, and that's where you can work with their financial aid office to see what they can do to help you. I have a story from when I used to work in Zion. Very sadly, I was working with a family that had a loss of life of a sibling and severe medical bills for a student that was a senior, was going off to a local college, and based on the medical bills that were attached to this car accident, essentially changed her entire financial aid portfolio of what she could offer and covered most of her cost of admission simply based on need after this fact. Other questions? These are great questions. It's nice to hear. Well, thank you guys. I know it's a long night for a Wednesday. We'll hang out, and if you do have specific questions, feel free to come on up. But really attentive and great audience, so we thank you. And if any questions come up, feel free to utilize those college essay writing workshops, the Wednesday night counseling, or just reach out to your son or daughter's counselor. Thank you.